morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV, and I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in the Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. We welcome you to anywhere around the world on this great show and across the United States of America as we talk about the turbulent and divisive issues of our times. A looming recession, rising prices, inflation, gas prices, and only a week away from the midterm elections, where everyone around the country and world is watching closely of what will happen with the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, the president, fighting hard to keep the United States Congress and Senate in Democratic control. But right now, polling is looking as if the Republicans are projected to win many of the legislative and Senate seats up for grabs. All the United States congressional seats are up for election as well. So we'll be talking a little bit about that on this show. And we encourage you to send us your ideas of issues you would like to talk about as we bring in guests frequently on this show. My monologue today is to just catch you up on some breaking news coming in from around the world, and we're going to take an opportunity to talk about some of these today. But first, we pray for the 150 Koreans who died in a crowd crush in Seoul on Saturday. Tens of thousands of people packed in a nightlife area in South Korea's capital for a large-scale Halloween celebration, and many died from suffocation. A terrible incident in South Korea that we pray for their country today. A pedestrian bridge collapsed in India, killing at least 132 people. This was a major expansion bridge in a historic landmark in western India. It's a century old and had just reopened after renovations. What we know is that nearly 400 people were on the bridge, and the bridge could have collapsed from weight. We pray for the families in India. And meanwhile, the Supreme Court will be hearing arguments today on using race in college admissions. The cases challenge affirmative action requests at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, actually affirmative action policies at these universities. And it is a very controversial issue. In the past, our Supreme Court has ruled in favor of using race as one of the many factors, but some analysts say that if the court decides that universities cannot consider race, it could be a major blow to campus diversity. And finally, let's talk about Paul Pelosi. The attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband is raising fears of political violence. An intruder broke into the House Speaker's San Francisco home this past Friday morning and attacked her husband, 82-year-old Paul Pelosi, with a hammer. He had suffered a fracture to the skull and is going to be okay. But many people in the country are really concerned about this kind of political violence. We pray for the Pelosi family, but they have been experiencing some significant mental turmoil and anguish over this event, and how many more of these types of incidents we will see. And finally, Brazil has elected its next president. Luiz Lula da Silva, an icon of the Latin American left, defeated right-wing President Bolsonaro 50.9% to 49.1%. He is 77 years old, served 2 terms as president in the 2000s, and will lead the region's largest country. He's pledged to defend democracy, restore justice, and save the Amazon rainforest. So a conservative goes down, and Brazil goes liberal. Interesting. Here we go. Let's get started. I want to bring with me into the show today Mark Lee, the co-producer and Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain making us all look good. Chris Greco, our foreign policy analyst, military analyst. And we have others joining the show.
We do have others joining the show. First off, I was going to say to Chris before I bring in one of the others, and of course, we've got our good friend Lee Newton Rhodes, who is here as well. But before I bring in one of our amazing new friends that I just met on Clubhouse and everything, I want to say something that I saw online earlier today and see where you think I'm talking about. He faces political turmoil, and among that turmoil is rising economic concerns, and there are definitely rising prices and things that are in the economic sphere and all along those lines. Where am I talking about, and what country could that be? That is a headline that I saw earlier today, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts as to where that is. Is that the United States? Is that Somalia? Is that England? Is that a number of other places that it could be, and all along that space? But it said politically polarizing and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, where am I talking about? What country could that be? And did Steve mention them earlier and all in that space? Because when I saw that headline, I was going like, wow, that could be the United States. Oh, I thought I'd bring it up at the beginning of this show and everything. So Chris, Lee, Steve, and then I'm going to bring in my sustainability guy. And I met him, like I said, on Clubhouse, and he's got some interesting thoughts about the world of sustainability and some things that he's done that are truly amazing. I was glad to meet him in the Field of Dreams room over there in the Clubhouse, and that is what they call the room, and all in that space. But what country am I talking about? I'll give y'all a quick quiz.
Georgia, U.S.
Yeah.
Could be, but no, that's not who I'm talking about. And all of that. Lee, you got a guess?
No, I'm not yet.
Steve, you got a guess? You actually
Can I buy a vowel?
India?
No.
Brazil. That is an article
Brazil.
that was on Brazil, because Brazil has been fighting between the left and the right, and that is actually the country that was in mind was none other than Brazil. And when I saw that headline, I was going like, yeah, that could be Georgia, that could be Pennsylvania, that could be Nevada here in the United States, that could be London, that could be a number of other places. I did want to mention that we do have Dan Worthington here as well. And now I'm going to bring in our very special guest, and hopefully he's got his camera and everything ready, because he is a sustainability person and all along those lines. Chris, glad to have you here with us. And I just wanted you to share a little bit about your amazing story, because it is a truly amazing story, as I heard it on Clubhouse, the things that you're doing with some energy stuff that I think Steve will be quite impressed with, because I know he's all about sustainability, and I'd love to hear some of this on our network and from your point of view. Like I said, as you were talking about it early this morning, yeah, folks, I was up way early in the morning hanging out with Chris and other folks like Consuelo Benson that does that room out of Canada. But if you'll share a little bit of what you are all about.
Well, I am the founder of Hope, Housing Our People Everywhere. We are a 501c3, and we want to show our children that they are the solution to every adult's problem. As we recover and rebuild natural disasters using the recycled material from the disaster, to build a sustainable house that won't burn, won't absorb water, it's stronger, termite-free, mold-resistant, seismic, recyclable, build it without a dumpster, build it cheaper than wood, and get a 60% discount on insurance versus a wooden home. In 2010, Nashville was flooded, but it was Hurricane Katrina prior to that. And Hurricane Katrina still destroyed. But if you start looking past that, this is where we started intervening and being able to do something to show people what they're capable of. Because the palm of our hand is so dexterous that people are amazed at what we're able to do with it. Now, the back of your hand, you can't do anything but hurt me. But what I'm set out to do was show our kids that they can do something positive in the afternoon. We can feed them as soon as they get out of school. And they, from first grade to eighth grade, they'll design the homes the high school students and the parole prisoners and the job creation is going to build. But giving them a positive purpose, and it's a pay it forward, pay it back program, because everything that they do is going to be bringing in income, and they're going to be earning a home. And it's time to give them a home that they'll never be thrown out of, so we can put stitches and antibiotics in this homeless problem and make sure that the infection never comes back by putting a suture in there. And in 2010, I showed 25 people how to gut a home in 30 minutes or less in Nashville. And we did 14 homes from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. But I asked each of them to go show 25 people what I just showed them. And we were able to gut 17,000 homes in 60 days, all done by volunteers. And they were all done the same way. But you would never know Nashville was underwater. And if you look at the Nebraska flood, if you look at, Houston, every one of these floods and everything since 2010 has actually been recovered, but it's been recovered the same way because it was one person going into an infected area and infecting it with a positive antibiotic that would say, look, work together. Don't work as an individual. You can't get this done. So we have to be able to work in unity in the community to give an equal opportunity. And in 2011, I built a home in Bloomington, Illinois out of recycled cars from Hurricane Katrina. It's not the first thing that I had built, because I built one right where the eye came across for Hurricane Katrina in 2006. That house saves $11,000 a year in insurance versus the wooden home next door to it. And it's 10 feet off the ground. It's right on the water. But it was built in Illinois, and it was built for 25% of what a local contractor wanted to build it out of wood. But the house don't burn, don't absorb water. It's stronger, termite-free, mold-resistant, seismic, built without a dumpster. It was built cheaper than wood, and we get a 60% discount on insurance. So that was my footprint in the beginning. And I wanted to recover and rebuild Hurricane Katrina out of all the recycled material. Mayor Nagin wanted $250 million. And he sold that material, and he done wrong with it. But what we offered him was, we won't pay him anything. We'll have buildable material here in 30 days, and we will create a sustainable way of life and get these people back on their feet and off the street and out of those trailers, and be able to do it without the insurance companies being the one benefiting from it because of the despair that they're going through. And in 2011, I built this home in the middle of the woods with cordless screw guns to prove I could do it in any jungle on the planet, with 5 people that never touched the material before in their life. And it was deemed the best built home in the city with over 100,000 houses. And also, I made the lead inspector hate his job because he had to go past houses that he knew would burn up. And he knew the difference. He saw.
Oops. I think Chris disappeared on us. Hopefully he'll come
Sorry
back.
about that.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody tried to call me. I'm sorry.
No problem.
But I became a 501c3 in 2018. I did get a congressional endorsement on that house. It was hand delivered to President Obama. I do have a copy of that. It's on my Instagram, so people can see it, because you need to see it. Because in that letter that was written, it says, we have created a way to give the homeless homes and the jobless jobs. That's a pretty bold statement to be a congressional letterhead hand delivered over in the Oval Office. But the difference is we had the housing crisis in 2012. So 2 years ago, I took 2 kids that didn't have anything to do in an afternoon, and I spent 2.5 hours with them, and we went to this city, another city that they didn't live in. And they built a tiny home in 2.5 hours. They'd never touched and built anything in their life. And they were so excited that they wanted to do it every day. But when I stood it up, I was right on a road that has 100,000 cars riding through our city every day. And
Wow.
my city told me to take it down. They fined us $4,000 for standing it up, and they gave me permission to do it. But they didn't know I was going to do it with 2 kids. That was going to show that a city that's had a homeless problem for 100 years, that 2 kids, how many kids we got? 30,000 in our district. What could they do in a day? Spending 2 hours out here doing something positive. It's not only going to change this community, it's going to change all the communities around here. And I started a youth program in July down in Louisiana, and we built 2 habitat houses with these kids, and they never touched a saw, but it's what they saw, because they built something and they outbuilt the adults that was already building next door. And it's on my Instagram too. But now we are implementing to where I'm doing workshops across the country. Anybody that has a problem anywhere, get a hold of us. We set up a 2 to 3 day workshop, but when we leave, lives are changed. And that part of it is what is going to make a difference, because you're going to get to see it, and you're also going to be able to build it.
Hey, Chris, along those same lines, and it's one of the things that you mentioned on Clubhouse and everything, one of the things that really impressed me, and I definitely want to hear from the other panelists as well, was a lot of what you've been doing has been going against or across the political divide. As I recall from your stories that you told, you've had both Republicans and Democrats that have been behind and also sometimes been a hindrance to your project. So it's definitely both on both sides, both helping you as well as hurting you. You've had it on both sides of the political aisle and all along those lines. And you'd also put out a challenge, and I had mentioned to you that the Durham has already elected their mayor, but you were saying that you have gone across a lot of places and you had actually asked the political candidates to do something very unusual. And I think that it would give them a great experience into what the homelessness is all about. Can you share a little bit about that with us as well? Because like I said, when you mentioned both of those things, I thought that they were amazing insights, and I'd love to hear your insights. And then I'm sure Lee and Dan and others may have some questions for you as well.
Definitely. It was a night in a box. I'd like you to, before election day, go and stay a night outside. And then we're going to have a discussion before the election, and everybody gets to see it, and they're going to know what you felt and what you want to make sure no one else has to be. Because people need to be accountable for their actions. You're going to say you want to do something, but what are you going to do? I've been able to put things in place as a charity that 17 states, we get 20% of your electric and gas. 26 countries, we get 20% of electric and gas. So this ain't just the United States, it's global. It's time to get everyone off the street and on their feet. Okay. If there isn't a street, then we need to pave it. We need to show them that they don't have to be going down these rocky paths. We can come across this crossroads as we all come together, as we cross paths, and show that a crossroad turns into something smooth, and let equality come over top of anything else. I might have led off of what our subject was there on your question, but
well, Chris, that's a good point. I mean, I think one of the things I've heard Freddie Kreuger talk about in his show is having more a great way to get our country coming together is finding really good civil projects, sort of like what our country did during the Peace Corps, but having projects where our young kids generations can come together and work on things which can get us working together rather than what's happening now. The country is so divided just based on political ideology, and and I think we've really gotten away from that. So I think what you're doing is very commendable, and whatever we can do to come together and build homes, help people that are affected by disasters, do these kinds of things. I think it's good for the country. And I have to get John Meacham's book. He was on one of the shows yesterday, but apparently, he's saying that, there are a lot of similarities now between the circumstances before the Civil War in the 1800s. He did confess that, we're not going to have a war where we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of people in deaths. But the fact is that the ideologies are just so divisive and so against each other that, we're really pulling away from being one country. So hopefully your actions can be a part of that movement to change that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Definitely Chris and Chris and Lee and also Dan. I don't know if you had any questions for my friend Chris here, who's doing this great work with his Hope organization, but you heard a little bit about what he's got going on, and I might see if Shaquille and Sasha and others want to jump on also.
Well, I don't have any questions, Chris Collins. It sounds like you've hit the nail on the head. This whole thing about new builds, right? So the new builds are the developments. I mean, it's happening here in North Carolina. Like it's destroying a lot of areas. The new builds are just they're. And I have to admit, I'm guilty as the next person for building a new house. This house is brand new; it's 4 years old, and I would say that as a house, I'd rather have my house in Baltimore. It was 1956. It was well built, very structurally sound, had a lot of good things to it. and the people that bought it are taking good care of it. The bottom line is do we recycle homes and just make them stronger and better and more, like you say, termite resistant, or do we go with these new builds that are basically huge and in some cases not as good as the original old builds, and have issues with different types of electrical use and different. This is supposed to be a the greenhouse type thing. You just keep the windows closed. It's kind of like keep the windows closed. What's that supposed to mean? You keep the windows closed all the time. Or you let the windows closed because then it saves energy. Really? So it's that type of thing that I think that people just have to understand what exactly are we talking about here, and the overdevelopment of areas is causing the floods. Ellicott City, which I bring up commonly on this show, had a 1 in 1,000 year flood twice. 1 year and then the next year, and the reason was because they had development above Ellicott City. Ellicott City was in the low area. They built asphalt along the roads, which basically was a water slide of water just coming down and just drenching the entire old area, and it did it twice, once every year for 2 years, and people left the old. They said we cannot rebuild the second time. We're done. We're out. And a lot of businesses just shut up and just went their ways, and a lot of buildings were razed. And so I think what you're doing is good. The idea behind it being we retain as much as possible, and we make a smaller footprint to be able to do the things we need to do within a smaller area, rather than this big gigantic area where you have acres and acres of open land, and then you have this big gigantic house that consumes a ton of energy, and that's the type of thing. So I agree with you wholeheartedly with what you're doing.
Well, and also we're going to put solar on every home. I got many different solar options. One of them is solar hydro. So it actually has a backup system to the solar. So when you're not getting the sun, you can still power. It will charge up the solar batteries.
Hydro meaning wind, Chris, or hydro meaning
no
water?
Hydro is water.
So how are you going to do water power? That's interesting.
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Oh, hydrogen. Okay.
Yeah, it was actually one of the very first, or was the first system. That is the company that I work with. They actually came up with the first prototype of this solar situation. So they're not new to the game. What I've done is I made collaborations throughout this world for a reason, because there's a solution to every problem. And right now we're putting Band-Aids on these problems, and it's not taking them away. It's costing us more. So I got a hold of Ben Carson, sent him a package, and they've been able to make it possible to do things that we were asking for. I was just write it into legislation, make it law. Let's change this thing from slumlords and let these people become landlords. And we do have this ability now. We can take Section 8 payments and turn them into homeowners. So that's people that are living in state housing and all these housing developments, and we can make them homeowners.
Good.
We can build HUD new housing now, instead of going get a conventional loan and then taking the Section 8 payments. HUD will actually allow you to build new construction for affordable housing, and use their money to do that. That had never been before. In California, I gave Governor Newsom a package, and I asked them to write it into legislation. And they're building 42,000 steel-framed homes for the homeless. And it's got a $5.8 billion budget, and that's not including any of the budgets that's throughout the city. And what they're doing is an 84 square foot footprint without a bathroom. So we designed a stat house. It comes with a bathroom. It's called Superior to a Tent. And then we have one called Superior to a Trailer. And these are built because the reason it's superior to a trailer is because you can go in there and light that trailer on fire, and it's going to burn up quite quickly. But you can go in there and light this on fire, and the only thing that's going to burn is your stuff. It's still going to be standing there when it's over. You can just take your stuff and clean it out and start over. that's the nice thing about looking into the technology. I'm not creating the wheel. I'm just trying to put titanium ball bearings on it and lithium grease on it so it rolls really well. But
Well, I just have two questions for you, Chris. And this is, one is solar, the solar stuff. I get it, about the solar aspect. The solar area is the new thing. It's the idea that you can take the sun and you can generate energy, and it's great and it's glorious and whatever else. But nobody's taking a look at what's going to happen in 10 to 20 years when that solar cell becomes, or even 25 years, when the solar cell becomes bad or it doesn't charge as much anymore, whatever else you have to replace those. Where do those solar cells go? If there's no, I've asked a number of people in the solar industry, and nobody's been able to answer my question: is how much energy does it take from a fossil fuel to be able to produce a solar cell? Number one, nobody can answer that question, and that's okay. It's kind of like nobody's going to be able to answer the question. Then, what are you going to do with the remnants? Are you going to throw them in a landfill? Are you going to recycle them? All those things have to come up. And unfortunately, we're sitting back. I'm hoping that in 15 years, somebody will come up with an answer to that, because we normally do. Humans are good about that. I mean, Chris, you're a perfect example of that, where you take a look and say, look, we have all this stuff. Like you just said, I don't want to invent the wheel. I just want to take the wheel, like you say, put titanium ball bearings on it, put some grease on it, whatever else, to make it better. So hopefully somebody will make a solar cell better, or they'll make it so that it lasts forever, which is impossible, but not impossible, but impossible at this point in time. So the question is what are you going to do when that solar cell? Well, forget that question. The question I want to ask is,
that's a good one. That's a good one. I could answer that question.
Yeah, okay,
for
please.
you real quick.
I don't want to put you on the spot, man.
No, they put me on the spot, man. That's what it's all about. Because I love problems. Because if there's a problem, there's a solution. So there is. We're going to recycle them. We've got a product right now that we can recycle plastic, styrofoam, and fiberglass. And we can build a block that'll give you an R50 insulation rating.
Oh,
you can't shoot
man.
a 2x4 through it. You can't shoot a gun through it. And
Wow.
I can build any design you want to build out of it. So that's the thing. There's a solution for every problem. So what's your next question?
Well, this sounds very Republican, and I'm sorry, but you got the homeless, and you're going to build them basically a stat house, which I think is a great idea. Trust, I just think it's super. Where do they get the buy-in? So in other words, you're going to say, hey, here's a house, and you're going to give a homeless person a house, which is fine, but where do they get the vested? What do they vest into the house? Do they help to build it? Do they, in other words, you're going to give them a house. When you give something to somebody for free, it's not theirs. They can piss it away and like, okay, I'll get another one for free because I'm homeless. So how do you? Okay, good, man, good.
I got you on that. The whole thing is that homeless person is going to create the rest of their life. Okay, right now they're struggling. They're trying to survive. We want them to thrive. And we want them to know who they are and realize that they are just as important as every other human being on this earth. And we're only as strong as our weakest link. So let's pick up our chain and make it out of titanium. And we can carry some links for a while until it's mended. And that's where the difference comes in, is we need to give them pride. They're going to build their home. Not only they're going to build it, but other homeless people are going to build it with them. Good. And when they and as they construct these things, they're going to go into it and say, "This is mine." Wow. And me being a 501c3 charity, I found out being an NGO, I can partner with anybody I want. So I decided to partner with every child on earth. This is theirs. Okay. It belongs to every person on earth, but every adult has to earn it by learning it. So our children are going to become the teachers, because when they come home and say, come look what I built, and they take their mom and dad out there and they say, guess what, Mom, you can come and help me tomorrow. And then whose life? You're going to change a life. All you got to do is spend an hour. These are proven things. I've got a machine that makes 36,000 linear feet of material a day. Okay. If you got a problem in your community, It's because you're the problem and you ain't found out about me. So that's it.
Well,
we need people to educate and listen and pay attention. It's the only free thing we have in life, and nobody can make up your mind for you. You'll be the one. So I can influence you, But ultimately, when you tell me you're going to do something, I got one of them photographic memories, and I can pull back conversations, and I won't call you out on it, but you know what you said, and did you do what you said? I do ask people a question, and I do not want it an answer. So hopefully anybody that's out there listening, just answer this to yourself. Who are you when no one's around, when you get to create and make a sound? Because every second of the day, you're a creator. So you're creating something positive. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet. If you all gave me one of your thoughts today, that's 7.5 billion positive thoughts that I couldn't have in my lifetime, let alone put down on paper. So what could we do today to make sure tomorrow that yesterday never happens again? And that's stepping up, doing 20 minutes and giving it to somebody else. If you look at what is humanity, I say, what is humane? It's against the law to have your dog or animal outside in the winter, but it's okay to have your mother, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, grandson, granddaughter, your dad. That's okay to be outside in the winter. To me, it's not. That's the first thing about getting this right is we can empty every animal shelter by giving every person that don't have a home and give them an animal for a companion. Now we don't have the crisis. We're fixing two problems at one time, but we're also fixing another one because we're fixing something of people not being alone. They have a companion. The companion has a companion, and we need to embrace our elderly. This is from 8-month-old to 80, 88, 108. I don't know. We'll take the oldest person on earth. I want to get as much out of that person as I can because they have the most experience of what they've seen. And when they leave, it leaves with them. And we want our children to actually know what has gone on in the past, not in a racial push, because we're the human race. If you look at the palm of your hand right now, every one of you hold the palm of your hand up like I am. It's pink. I promise you. Okay. And that means you're the human race. We're human beings, but we're not being human.
Yeah. Chris, we really appreciate you being with us. We're going to keep you on, but we're going to get into some of our other issues. But you can stay if you want. But we really want to thank you for your time and for everything you're doing. And we will encourage you to come back. This is a very intriguing concept, and I'd like to learn more about it in terms of just addressing homelessness with veterans and others as well. As we getting close to Veterans Day, could this also be something to help those that are coming back from wars to help them build homes? So, but thank you for being with us today, and please, you can stay with us if you want. We get into some of the turbulent politics, so some of our guests like to leave, but we want to come in and stay on that. But thank you, Chris. We're going to go to some of our other issues real quickly. We pray for South Korea. I've never heard of something like that. Do you guys have any reactions to what happened in Korea?
Well, my first reaction as a event planner is that a lot of times there are things that should have been done ahead of time, and I'd be interested to find out what those kind of constrictions were and how they were handling the whole event, because I do understand that it was during a celebration. I believe it was a Halloween celebration, and I know that even if we look down in Texas, I think that was earlier this year, there were a lot of things that were mismanaged by that particular incident because people were starting to get back out, and when they started to get back out, they were not necessarily following all the rules and regulations that they should be, because a lot of times when we have had this time of being kind of cooped up in our houses and doing other things, a lot of folks have been very excited to get back out into the community and do festivals and do events, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to follow some of the rules that go into event planning. So I've got to do a little bit more research to find out exactly what happened and how it happened, because I would be concerned about that, whether it was here in the United States or whether it was in another part of the world like South Korea and all along those lines. And if anybody's got any idea how that was being done, hold on a second,
Joe,
how that was being done and how that was being handled, I would love to hear that. I actually went to, just on a personal note, a event this past weekend. It was actually an event that I think Shaquille would have loved being at, even though I didn't see that many Greyhounds out there. But I went to a event called Barktoberfest, which is a celebration of Oktoberfest for dog owners, and we had live music and a lot of activities supporting the dogs and the pets, to the other Chris's point, and definitely saw a lot of people that were out there. and for the most part that they were not masked. So I'm assuming that everybody was vaccinated and or had the boosters. But hey, that's just me making an assumption because I don't know that there was anything that I had to give that actually proved that that was the case. So for all I know, I could have been stepping into a super spreader event depending on what is going on in the world and all along those lines. But like I said, so far so good. But I'm just saying that there needs to be actual activities that are done to protect us as we start to go back out into the world. And I say that as one that is not only a producer here, but is also an event planner as well. So definitely that's just one of the things that I would say is that we need to make sure that some of these precautions are done. And we've already seen incidences where I'm not sure they're being done, whether that's on the security side or on the health side. But Chris, you had some comments based on what you heard and everything.
So it's an experience, right? Steve, every single crowded event is this far away from being a tragedy. I mean, the bridge collapse in India, those were people that were celebrating your celebration of light. There were hundreds of people on that bridge. It's a 100-year-old bridge, and they were shaking the bridge. I mean, you're this far away from tragedy. Bang, it happens. Because let me give you an example. The polio, right? The polio is in Siena, Italy. It's run every summer. I don't know if it's run the past couple of pandemics, but before that, when I went, it was the 1970s. And that place was packed, absolutely packed. I mean, it was packed so tightly that I had to get out of there. I mean, I had to leave that area. And I thought, man, one person shoots a gun, does something, a little explosion, whatever else, you're going to have hundreds killed because people are not going to be able to get out of that area. There was only 2 exits out of that square. And let me tell you, they were small exits. So I got out of there and I watched the race at a bar, which was actually nicer, about a block away, and it worked out fine. So yes, those things can happen in the United States. Mark, you're right. The more you pack people in tighter, oh, wow, look at all these people, yeah, that's really great. But then all of a sudden you have a shooting from a hotel, wherever that was in not Las Vegas. And all of a sudden you got yourself what 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 targets. So it's a real, you have to make sure you have exits. You have to make sure that they're not blocked. You have to make sure that people have, the fire things. I mean, all these areas have to be done to prevent that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just well, let's go. I'm going to start with Shaquille Latimer, and then we're going to just the next political topic of the day. Terrible, this political violence, what happened with Paul Pelosi. But should we all be concerned about, is this the one-time incident that happened, or is it going to be more? Are we going to see more political violence? No, my issue isn't towards going against Republicans. It just seems like both parties are so energized, and this could happen on both sides of the spectrum. Shaquille, or do you think it's just a one-time incident of a person that was crazy and he just happened to try to go in there and hit the speaker's husband with a hammer? I mean, poor guy.
Well, should we wait before we draw conclusions that it's political violence? Should we wait until we find out something?
Yeah,
we've got no information as yet as to exactly what went on, or we've got limited information. How did politics even get into this so quickly? I mean, it's not like there's an election coming up or anything, but basically a homeless guy goes in there with a hammer and attacks Paul Pelosi and yells out, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" So the connection is that this is because of election denial by Republican supporters, and it's all about January 6th. Really? Like, I'm sitting on the other side of the world watching this. Are you serious? Are you guys being serious over there? I mean,
I think
that sounds so ridiculous, right? And what I find quite amusing is people like Mike Pence saying, this is a travesty. How could an elected representative be attacked like this? How could this happen to our politicians, our public figures? This man needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Why? Why should he be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law? He should be out on bail already, right? That's what should be happening. I don't know why he's been charged with attempted murder, all right? Because anybody else that happened to, they'd be out.
Well, when you hit someone on the head with a hammer, you can be charged with attempted murder.
Well,
Steve?
I know.
Just the last few weeks, there's been other
going
hammer
to jail,
attacks.
buddy.
in San Francisco, the person's been out straight away. And when they do get prosecuted, they get prosecuted to the minimum extent of the law. So what basically the politicians are saying is what I'm taking away is, if you get attacked, sucks for you. We're going to defund the police. If we get attacked, that is an affront to our democracy. And that's how it looks. And that's how I've spoken to a lot of Americans about it over the weekend on both sides of the aisle. And that's pretty much how it looks to them as well, that the politicians are just above everybody else.
Shaquille?
No, there's some of that, but
Mark?
Shaquille, along those same lines, I definitely want to hear from you, Lee, and everything. Along those same lines, there have been definitely some research into the person that made the attack, and there is definitely some concerns about them being a supporter of the whole QAnon and that kind of mindset, and all along those lines. So I don't know that he was just strictly homeless and all in that space. I'm just saying, but that's what I've heard. Hold on.
But you'll be pleased to know, you'll be very, very pleased to know that he's also made just as many positive comments about groups like BLM and other causes the Democrats love.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
They just sit there and talk about one side and not the other.
No, I was going to get to the other side.
What I am pleased about, though, is that he is actually there.
Pelosi, but it was an issue that they raised deliberately.
What I am really pleased about is that he is there illegally, and you actually have a crime being committed by an illegal alien from Canada, of all places. So, this is somebody who's crossed the northern border and decided to overstay.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is that California has become a very interesting state and everything, because the other thing that has happened is because of and I think we talked about it last week, because of the, and I can only call it a racist remark, the racist remark that was made by a certain person in that community. Now there's this whole notion of there being a divide between two minority groups and them going at each other, because there's been a lot of conversation around what's going on between the Latin American and the African American community because of what was taking place there in Los Angeles in their city council and all along those lines. So that's another way that they are framing the discussion and all in that space.
But again, what's the problem? If you want to make skin color, and in your terms, Mark, colorism, how dark somebody is, if you want to make it so that different minority groups, are more or less oppressed than other minority groups, that's what you're going to get. You know that. You guys have done it deliberately. You guys have continued to do it no matter what. So now that you've got people divided, you've got what you wanted. Lee,
I wouldn't go that far. Colorism has been around for a while, including in your country of India and around the world, and it is actually something.
How is India my country? I don't speak the language. I don't know the culture, and I'm like 10 generations away from there. How is India my country any more than probably Ireland or something is Lee's country?
Fair enough, and I'll definitely take that argument and everything. But I'm just saying that colorism. My point is that colorism and the nature of colorism. You joke about it and you laugh about it, but it's a very real issue. It's even a real issue here in this area. It's an issue in the African American community. It's an issue in the Latin American community.
It's a real issue in a number of places. It's a real issue for you because it's really important for you to walk around with a chip on your shoulder about how oppressed you are. For somebody like me, I don't give a shit about the skin color of somebody else, and I really resent people caring about what color my skin is.
But if somebody gets advantages because of their skin color or because of their shade of skin color,
if you're going to judge somebody by their skin color,
it's part of the systematic racism that exists in society. That is where colorism plays a role. If somebody looks more white than the actual person that is a darker complexion and they get a job because of that, that becomes an issue, and that has been an issue for decades.
In your opinion, that's your opinion.
I can prove you. I can see you have
you can
proof and everything else about how it works.
You can prove all sorts of things. That's still your opinion. I'm not walking around with that. Woe is me because I'm not white. Chip on my shoulder. I just don't do that. But Lee, you want to
have a woe is me. I actually have a very positive attitude about some of the things that have come from our culture that people don't even celebrate and acknowledge. Like I said, the fact that when you're doing a lot of things, including using your phone and using a number of other inventions that were actually founded and created by African Americans, that folks don't want to even acknowledge that fact, that's a problem, including a problem in our school system. Because there are a lot of things that you use on a regular basis that you don't even realize were created by African American forces.
So what? Who invented Wi-Fi? So
actually, a lot of people say African Americans invented that, or at least the concept, or at least one of the early inventors was a African American gentleman. But does anybody talk about that?
It's somehow an affront to African Americans that every single invention that they've come up with is not sort of deified, that we aren't sitting there worshipping them. You don't know all the inventions that were made by Indians or Chinese or white people or, Japanese, but, what are we supposed to do?
I mean, part of it is.
Let's shift topics, guys. This isn't a topic on race.
Well, let's say
So let's go back. Let's go back to Paul Pelosi real quick. I just want to state something, and just one thing, and then I swear to God, I'll shut up. No, I won't. So basically, let's go to Paul Pelosi, and what we're doing is we are jumping ahead 9 steps. Into, hey, it was a Republican, it was political violence, it was this, it was that. And all I'm going to say is the example again and again and again that I bring up in Washington, D.C., you had the Washington sniper. The first thing with the Washington sniper was it was a white supremacist. It was a white I mean, this thing came out, it was a white supremacist. It's white. And where did it come out of, Mark? Sorry to say, it came out of the DJs of color that sat there and said, it's a white supremacist, and we should, every African American in the nation should hide because they're going to get shot by snipers. This thing was nationwide, whatever else. Then all of a sudden they caught the guy, and they were both black. All of a sudden it was like everyone just shut up about it. That was it. Nobody said anything. Nobody said a word, whatever else. You need to step back, get the police report, figure out first of all, I'm going to tell you right now that her house, Nancy Pelosi's house, is highly secure. There are cameras everywhere. There's no way that guy broke into that house.
Well, there's
no way.
Not only is there high definition cameras, where exactly is the police body cam footage? The police respond to that residence. And there's,
right. So, there's a lot of questions. Just a lot of questions.
The guy was in there with his underwear at 2:30 in the morning. Mark.
Let's put that let's put it in the garage for now, guys.
I don't know.
I put it in the garage.
Interrupted. Was there any other crime ever interrupted where the victim said, "Excuse me, can you stop? I have to go to the bathroom." any murder,
wait a minute. I don't want to be hit anymore.
Makes no sense. It's a Shaquille, to your point, in terms of the double treatment. Lee Zeldin, just a few weeks ago, was attacked on stage with someone with a razor blade, attempted murder. The guy was out the next day.
Exactly my
Point.
Steve,
exactly
I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. So for some people, it's absolutely, it's hell. If you've done something to some people, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. You're an affront to democracy. Other people, it should be celebrated. Now, it's worth noting that in Lee Zeldin's case, in that case, the guy's being charged. His person is actually being charged, and I think it ended up being a mental health assessment or something that's being done on him, right? But he is actually having to go through the system. And Lee Zeldin said on an interview just recently, the only reason why that's happened is because I'm a sitting member of Congress. Had I not been, this wouldn't be a big deal. And, I think that the everyday person that's how they're feeling. That it doesn't matter if something happens to them, but if something happens to elected representative, well, how dare that happen? And look, if I know that from here, from the other side of the world, because Americans are telling me that, then, it's clearly an issue. Which is a substantial issue coming into these midterm elections, and I guess it will continue to be an issue going into 2024.
What it is fascism. There are two.
Stephen, Mark, a lot of facts are coming out now about Paul Pelosi that are not going to be pretty, and were not the original story.
And it's terrible that it happened, but it didn't happen the way that the media is trying to paint it. All the facts are not in yet, and so the guy was wacky.
That any story that came out in the media did not happen the way the media said it. If you just get a newspaper and throw a dart at it, whatever story you land on, the truth is something completely different to what the media has just told you.
Now, Mark, I have to say, I respect your view. I respect your opinion. You're a good guy. You're a brother. I'm not black. I'm kind of brownish because I'm Native American in me.
Shut up, Dan. Just shut up.
Brownish what by Utah standards.
I love everybody. No, I'm kind of shunned by my people. It's okay. I don't care. I kind of like being shunned a little bit. Gives me more anonymity.
Well,
let my people go.
So in Steve's opening monologue,
I had a dream.
he made mention of, well, what if the courts strike this down and say that you cannot consider race when it comes to when it comes to university admissions, and how terrible that would be because you'd lose diversity. Well, firstly, geez, you've got such a
I just said what the analysts say. I do think you.
But okay, we'll go with what the CNN analysts say.
You're a parent. I know.
Firstly, what a low, terrible view of your fellow American, right? That your fellow Americans are going to be so terribly racist. And secondly, when it comes to diversity, but what about Asian Americans who've been deemed white now because they've got white privilege because they've been successful? What about Indian Americans who are also deemed white now when it comes to places like Washington State because they've been successful, because they don't fit the poor, oppressed minority definition, because so
they
many
work
Indians
hard.
have gone on to success, they are now being discriminated against. So, places like Harvard said, if you come from an Asian background, I'm sorry, but there's not going to be enough places for you because we really need to have more diversity.
But there is an argument for economic. There is an argument for economic diversity as well, and I think
what's that have to do with skin color?
Minorities that have that there are Black minorities that come from disenfranchised families or communities, and allowing them in the university does promote the diversity.
And therefore.
That's bullshit. Also, they're poor white as well.
Then Steve, why aren't you going to poor white communities? Why aren't you going to Little Rock, Arkansas, and saying to those people, those white people that Democrats love to refer to as white trash and trailer park
crackers or
why
whatever.
aren't you going in and getting their kids?
Shaquille, I have shocking news for you. We actually are doing that because many of the universities do have programs that are actually geared toward people that are of poorer situations as well. As I mentioned to you last week, I was part of a program called EOP, and one of the requirements was around the fiscal part of it also. So it wasn't just strictly African Americans. There was folks that had a certain amount of monetary constraints as well. So definitely people that are poor are being reached out to by some of the universities and all along those lines. It's not just Marquette, it's also UNC. It's a number of other places as well.
There's a huge movement in America to help poor white kids. Yeah, I believe
it's a movement to help poor folks in general. Yeah. You can believe what you want to believe and everything, but I'm telling you that those programs do exist and they do actually are part of the programming that goes on and all along.
Mark is correct. I mean, FAFSA and some of the others, really do target individuals that have certain incomes.
Let's get to Boston
to the degree of affirmative action, Chris.
What's that?
To a similar degree of affirmative action.
No, the FAFSA is not. It's not affirmative action. It has to do with.
No, that's not what I said. I said
financial.
It's targeting people, targeting poor people, and putting poor white kids in at the same level as affirmative action puts black kids in.
Oh,
no.
Well, I didn't think.
I'll bet you from over here without knowing the program. I bet you that's not the case.
That's only financial assistance.
Shaquille, if it was the case, they wouldn't ask for your ethnicity.
Correct. Well, they don't. They don't. Not on the FAFSA form.
Are you sure?
They're not asked. Yes, because I mean, I was involved in that when I was part of the Air Force ROTC recruiting aspect. So they do not ask for ethnicity. They ask for it, but you don't have to put it down. You can say prefer not to answer.
Yeah,
you can just put it.
But they ask. But they ask.
They do ask.
People are going to answer that are people that think that their skin color or their ethnicity is going to help them, right? Because if you think, oh, look, I fit into this minority group, tick, that's what's going to happen. Look, we've got the same thing. I know you guys think you're so unique over there. We've got the same thing over here in Australia with Aboriginal Indigenous people. All of a sudden, Indigenous people have been given special treatment, special pathways into universities, etc. Okay, so what's happened? It's now estimated that some 70% of the applicants who tick yes, I'm an Aboriginal or Indigenous person in this country have absolutely no link whatsoever. But you know what you're not allowed to do? You're not allowed to say to somebody, really, you identify as an Indigenous person? Can you prove it? Oh, you're not allowed to ask that because, drum roll, it'd be racist to ask that.
Well, I've got a couple of things you brought up that are very interesting. I'd love to hear, and we've only got a few more minutes to go, so maybe we'll get into it on tomorrow's show and everything. But one, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts and everybody on the panel's thoughts around something else that's been going on for decades now, because there are a lot of what have become successful African-American colleges and all along those spaces. And now there are students that technically are minorities because they are European Americans that are now getting into these universities because they have strong programs, such as the law school over at North Carolina Central University, where actually I think might have been one of our governors, lieutenant governors, actually went to that school because it was a strong program and had a strong law kind of
Howard and Morgan up in DC and Washington.
So
as being a white person, I could go in there and say I'm a minority and literally,
are these white students then disadvantaged? Because according to you, black students can't learn and absorb information unless the person delivering.
I never said that, Shaquille. Stop lying on me.
That's exactly what you said last week. That is exactly what you said last week. So, do the white students going to?
I never said that. You tried to say put words in my mouth.
Are they unable to
out of my lips? So, like I said, don't go there.
Because the person teaching them doesn't look like them. That's exactly what you've said. You've said it not just last week and the week before. You've said it constantly.
No, I've said that sometimes people like to have a positive role model from their community in the system, and that is what I said. And that is
no, we were specifically talking about schools, and you specifically said that the students were unable to learn properly.
I never said they were unable to learn. I would never say that when I've had two lectures. I never said that, and I never would say that. Don't go there and say that I said that, but I didn't say that. And all along those lines. So I do have one other question for you, Chris, really quickly as we wind down. And I know Steve got to do his monologue going out. But I actually had the pleasure yesterday on the Latin show that we do, Que Pasa Mujer, of having Enrique on. Enrique is a Latin American veteran. And one thing that he brought up is that, and I get where he was going, but at the same time, I am concerned about it because he was saying that we that actually only 1%, which I did not know it was that low and everything, of the world population is involved in the military. So he was saying that the 99% need to be more concerned about that 1%. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that when we hear that whole 10% monologue going on with folks in the wealth period. But he just brought up the fact that we're not doing enough with the veterans and that they actually represent 1% of the population, but that we need to be doing more, even though because they're bringing a lot to the table, like we were talking about with some of the Asian population and everything. But I just wanted your take on the 1 and 99% analogy.
Okay, 15 seconds. Basically, it goes something like this: that the amount of benefits that are given to veterans now, as opposed to when I was in, is astronomically better. And I think that a lot of veterans sit back and they go, "We want more." Well, I get that you want more, and we always want more for the veterans. But the bottom line is this: is that 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, I don't care what it is. The bottom line is that if I take a look at the amount of federal budget that's paid for veterans, it's astronomically good. I mean, now, do they need more? Probably they do, especially in the world of mental health. But that's my take on it, because I want to make sure Steve gets his out.
Well, we didn't get to talk about.
It's Halloween. You look at the poll numbers and go, "That's the scariest thing I've ever seen."
It's Halloween, and I'm playing the first Hindu president of the United States, 2032.
Something.
Maybe 40. I'm 52, so I got 30 years left. Watch out. Here I come. Once I got to the White House, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to go back. But with that being said, we forgot to talk about Bolsonaro, the conservative in Brazil, gone. And we're going to be talking about that. And I think the final thing we need to talk about in this show as I close out is China and what's going on with China's economic slowdown. Clearly, growth has slowed. Premier Xi is really focusing on supporting state companies and limiting free market capitalism, which has really been China's kind of blessing, so to speak, in terms of their arrival. And some skeptics, I know we've talked about China as a superpower, but I want to bring David M. Walker on to talk about that, because now some people are saying that, they're going to be falling decades behind now, from what we thought that they were going to overtake the superpower in the next, 5 to 10 years. But I'm hearing even numbers as, late as 2060, that it's going to be really hard for China. But who knows? It's too early to tell. There's still a threat. There's still a force. They still have a strong military. Maybe he wants to focus inward on China and focus on what they're doing internally. We don't know what's going on in China. So we'll be talking about that on World Dish and try to bring some guests on as well. Thank you all so much. From the light and love of our hearts, we wish you all the best. It'll always lift us out of the darkness. And we'll be joining us on Economics Monday for a discussion of Social Security. And remember, like the musical Annie, the sun will always come out tomorrow. And there's nothing like President Franklin Roosevelt singing that song with Annie and Daddy Warbucks.
You want to Steve it?
We need
Steve,
some
you
of
want to
that
sing?
in the United States today. Thank you all so much. See you soon.
See you soon.